It's time for us to take a look at some of our news for this Tuesday morning. It is December 6th, 2016, and we see that the pipeline project in Dakota is not quite over yet, with the president saying yesterday that the United States is mulling alternate routes for that North Dakota pipeline. Now, keep in mind, this would be the most direct route to get the North Dakota shale, that Bakken oil shale, down to refineries in Illinois. So they're looking now if they're going to go around that or through it in a different way. However, they say it's not over, and they're going to, quote, let it play out, with the different protesting groups still ramping up, and with law enforcement in North Dakota getting extra money now from the North Dakota governor. They've approved additional loans to continue to pay for law enforcement. So it looks like the confrontation is continuing, even though the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has denied the permit for that crossing point. It looks like they're going to try to go a different route and still try to get the pipeline through. The Russian news agency TASS reports on the situation in Aleppo in Syria as basically the call now from Paris and from London to stop the operations in Aleppo. They're saying that Paris and London want to stop it to protect terrorists. And in fact, they're straight out calling it lies and propaganda. So the war of words is escalating between Russia and NATO over what's going on in Syria. It looks like Ben Carson has accepted President-elect Trump to become the HUD secretary. Reactions, of course, very interesting because Carson is on record as saying that it is not the government's job to take care of the indigent. It is private sector. One of the Twitter responses is that putting somebody like Carson in charge of HUD would be like putting somebody who doesn't believe in public education in charge of the education department. In Washington, D.C., a North Carolina man on Sunday walked into a pizzeria with what they're calling an assault rifle, pointed it at his employee. After that employee fled, he fired a couple of shots, prompting a whole bunch of local restaurants and other businesses to go on lockdown. The man was arrested. He's facing misconduct charges involving a firearm. They're not saying exactly what his motive was, but he told police that he was there to investigate a conspiracy theory involving the fake news issues during the election. The Prime Minister of Japan, Abe, is going to make a visit to Pearl Harbor, the first such visit by a Japanese leader. It comes after President Obama made the first such visit by an American leader to Hiroshima. And although Obama did not offer any apologies for the dropping of the nuclear bomb, and it's not expected that Abe is going to offer any apologies for the attack on Pearl Harbor, it does look like this is an attempt towards some kind of normalization in terms of eventualities and the countries being able to continue to work together. The man who was arrested back in early 2015 for a plot on the U.S. Capitol, I don't know if you remember this, a Cincinnati man who was apparently, he's American, influenced by Islamic Muslim radicals. He has now renounced that. In his sentencing, he's going to be sentenced soon. He's basically, the sentencing hearings continuing yesterday, in which the defense lawyers brought in somebody to talk about his mental state, as they're saying he's now renounced that ideology that caused him to want to go and attack the Capitol during President Obama's State of the Union address. President Putin is now apparently on the short list for Time Magazine's Person of the Year. TASS reports on that. Of course, there are 11 people total, I think, or maybe 11 others besides Putin who are on that list. That is going to be decided by the readers of Time Magazine and, of course, the Time editorial board, and they'll announce on December 7th who the Person of the Year is going to be. Besides Putin, you've also got President-elect Trump and the Democratic candidate for president who lost the election, Hillary Clinton, on that list as well. Justin Ross Harris, the 35-year-old man who left his son in the car while he was sending explicit messages to teenage girls, he's now been sentenced to life in prison for his son's death. Defense trying to call him a flawed but God-fearing man who simply forgot that his son was in the car after a father-son breakfast. A very rough case to look at, as any of these cases are. He basically was convicted of intentionally leaving his son in the car to die. And the last story we have, if you remember the name Madeleine McCann, she was a 3-year-old who was abducted back in 2007 out of Portugal while her family was on vacation, her family from Britain. Now, apparently, the latest is that she may have been kidnapped by a European child trafficking ring. And this is something that actually the theory had come out in late 2007, but they thought that it was a bungled burglary. Now that has both sides focusing on that theory that the little girl was picked up by a child trafficking ring back in 2007. That's what we've got for our national news. Stay tuned. Here I've got our Alaska news and also a commentary for today that focuses on fatherhood, something which I know a lot of people today struggle with, and I'll give one of the tips that I do that I think my kids appreciate. They've told me they do. We'll talk about that during the commentary, and all of this, of course, can be found online at my website, radiofreespeech.com. If you'd like to become a sponsor, I'd love to have you both as a subscriber or perhaps as a sponsor through Patreon. Links are there, as well as free audio download. If you'd rather listen to this without having to watch the streaming, we've got the long form, 30 minutes of news at radiofreespeech.com. Check it out.